Squint.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. Fascinating thing, taking the draw. A moment of optimistic defeatism that feels different every single time. A tactical decision made in the moment for emotional reasons only. It's an impossibility to be objective over. Where Scotland women's honours even with France in 2020 felt like a win given their David and Goliath nature. The 2017 Lions tour left both sides just gagging for extra time. And Portugal's decision to draw this weekend literally acted as a win, guiding them to their first World Cup in 16 years. What an amazing achievement. What a kick, Samuel Marquez. England's heroics before settling for stalemates left Twickenham shrugging. And yet this was one of the most fascinating games of the autumn so far. Two teams targeting this game as the focal point of their entire campaign. And with a 25-all final scorecard, two teams leaving maybe satisfied, who even knows? So how did England and New Zealand play out this spectacular tie at Twickenham, and just what does it tell us about either team? Whilst the results have been maybe even more mixed, the All Blacks this autumn are very different to the ones that rocked up in Europe 12 months ago. No longer reliant on talent alone in an empty structure, we're starting to see the birth of a very distinctive, very definite and very frequently inventive style of rugby, using tight carries and forward power to create expansive rugby, all built on typically Joe Schmidt attention to detail, becoming the masters of turning 5 metres into 30. For one example of one of these innovations, take a look here at how Scott Barrett propels himself into contact. He's not looking to stay on his feet at all. He doesn't want to try and burst through the carry or anything, but rather launch himself under and through the tackle, knowing he'll hit the deck early, but being behind the defence. Surveyor then flies in to keep the pace up and drive, catching England before they're set, and the next phase, brother Barrett times his pass perfectly to smash Ioane over the gain line by isolating Farrell with just his timing. Tuolangi steps in to help, and it means San centres, the English forwards need to fold extremely hard to cover the space. Curry is smart enough to spot this, but also flying so fast Barrett can easily step and burst through the defence. And whilst the moment is eventually ended by some brilliant defence by Jack Van Poortvliet, who just assesses the All Black attack, Caleb Clark is stood here, offering no threat or option whatsoever, and with Barrett having carried recently, Mo'unga has nobody in his boot stood here, with Clark having not filled in there either, meaning Van Poortvliet can tell the only way Mo'unga can get this wide to where the space is, to use the overlap they've worked, is with a huge looping ball which will go about here, and that gives him the time to spot blitz and shut it down. However, they deliver on a lot of these themes more successfully not long after. Taylor here does exactly the same as Scott Barrett did in the first minute, launching himself at the ground between English defenders. You won't score a try with this, but it's an amazing subtle tactic for getting you front foot ball. New Zealand have a much easier job reaching the ruck than New Zealand do, clear out really cleanly and generate really lightning fast ball against an English side who are scrambling to just get onside. Having been involved on the far side moments earlier, Farrell and Tuolangi are still getting back, and this extra metre means they have to run diagonally backwards as well as drifting to the side, putting them nowhere near to making the tackle, especially with Ioane hitting this brilliant line to capitalise on the quick ball. The referee is in Genge's way, which means he can't apply any line speed or momentum at all, allowing Ioane to hit a weak shoulder and crash over for what would have been a third try in 15 minutes if it weren't for Ioane himself being a very naughty boy a few phases earlier. All following on from everything that was started by this huge interception from the only flanker named after the unit of measurement his performance should be judged on, that is tenuous. Now, it's easy to point to this as a mistake by Van Poortvliet, who many people assume is South African because of his name, but was actually born in Wicklow in Ireland. But really, it's a compound error that Papali'i picks off brilliantly. England are looking for ball at the tail to play off to launch an attack, but Cowan-Dickie overthrows slightly. The egg bastard sails over the 15-metre line, meaning the line-out is officially now over, and hence there's no offside. It's all open play, allowing Papali'i to advance. He's really alert to this. England do adjust and win the ball, but if Cowan-Dickie gets his throw within the 50 metres, Papali'i is here when Van Poortvliet catches the ball, and he delivers it calmly. As it is, Papali'i is here. There's scarcely time to adjust to do anything, and he just gives him the ball. And yet, say what you like about Ben Youngs, right? And I know I have in the past, and I apologise for that. But as we see in a similar situation against France, this is a rookie error a halfback makes but once at test level, something you learn from very, very quickly. Young's, of course, infamously made it on his first cap when the pass was picked up by William Webb Ellis, and it's a moment JVP will really learn from. Similar to the moment that led to the disallowed Ioane try. Your eyes will naturally say this is a Van Poortvliet error, but really this is down to Sinclair not binding onto the ruck with his full shoulder, and hence leaving his 9 exposed. Which is exactly how England like to leave their wide expanses as well. Now, without the ball, England are in an interesting place, because they know current defence coach Anthony Seibold is leaving at the end of the Autumn Internationals, just 1 game's time, and we have no idea if he'll take his existing system with him and replace it with something entirely new come the Six Nations. But the All Blacks still found a few workarounds for what he has left. This is a tiny, smart moment. These 2 forwards as a unit wrap around, which forces Itoje to plant his feet, meaning the existing edge forward, Rutalik, can draw the cover and put Talea down to make a few metres. It's an incredibly Joe Schmidt play, twisting what their shape appears to be without changing it at all. And then we have the play stuck on repeat. England like to defend like this. The winger starts narrow, then works outwards, meaning they can essentially push the opposition out towards the touchline, try and put them into touch. So, in an extremely Joe Schmidt move, New Zealand saw this as an opportunity to attempt approximately 86,234 cross kicks. England's fail-safe is Freddie Stewart comes up from fullback to try and shut down the space the moment the kick comes in, but this can be countered too, as we saw for the Rico Ioane try, running a phenomenal outside support line, hidden until after the kick lands, only changing his line then, yet remaining always obvious for Clark. Clark knows exactly where he is and what he's doing, meaning he can fix Stewart and put Ioane way down the wing to score in the far corner, as you are seeing here. It was quite a long way, so I had to stretch that sentence out. But it also tends to leave a huge amount of space in behind if you double up on the kick and kick again. However, with it being Caleb Clark on this wing instead of a player with core skills or a rugby brain, we only saw this once, and Ioane ruined it by chasing from in front of the kicker. Of course though, this wasn't because Ioane was chasing the ball. He was just trying to run home to his computer to get back to making a new website on Squarespace. Ever since being told how simple, easy and beautiful it is to make any website by Ian Foster, Ioane's been positively addicted. He thinks, sleeps, speaks Squarespace. He thinks about nothing else, including in a game. In fact, on this month's tour, Ioane has made a remarkable 66 websites, yet all of them easily managed from Squarespace's one centralised portal, which also lets him duplicate one and recreate it elsewhere to tweak individual little details. So many features, so little time with a rugby tour going on. Yet if you have more time than Ioane, you can head to the link in the description and use the offer code SquidgeRugby to save some money on starting. Try and beat its record. Try and do 69. Ooh, that's a funny number. 70. Let's say 70 websites. It was a full-on fascinating first half performance by the All Blacks that, for me, ranks amongst the best they've played under Foster so far. The accuracy with which their power became pace and their pace became points is frankly quite scary at times. And the triple playmaker system with Barrett Mo'unga is really starting to work, especially with the 2-4-2 structure Joe Schmidt seems to be favouring. A system designed to emphasise the skills of the forwards. That's why he's put it in place, because the All Blacks have the most skillful forwards in the world. Foster said something recently about how the usual All Black way is to spend the first 2 years of a cycle developing the game plan, then the following 2 years building a squad of players who can play it, but he decided this time to swap it, which led to New Zealand playing an outdated brand of rugby for 2 years. So if this is them halfway towards their ideal game, they're starting to be real signs that they could be properly scary in 12 months' time. But speaking of 12 months' time, well, I made the extraordinarily bold prediction a few months back that I thought that England might be world champions by then, and on Saturday, we saw the cleanest examples of just what that might look like start to slot into place, as England's attack looked its sharpest since, well, the last World Cup in 2019. And whilst the scoreboard only clattered upwards in the last 15 minutes, there was evidence of things starting to work throughout the entire game. For about 8 years now, every team at test level has played some variation of the 1-3-3-1, a structure that plonks all your players across the pitch to make sure the full width is being held, the forwards in positions that best suit their skill set, and you always have someone in place to clear out no matter where the ball is taken in, no matter where you carry into contact. England this year have started to move away from this idea. They've started to change entirely, allowing forwards to drift between groupings in real time and reshuffle, forwards and backs becoming interchangeable, pods splintering and reforming into new shapes on the fly, making the attack frequently more dynamic. But it's still a work in progress, and the teething problems are still being worked out, and we're seeing them often cost England tries at key moments. Here, England run 2 waves of attack entirely lateral to each other, their 3 biggest carriers dropped amongst amongst the two best distributors, meaning Farrell and Smith could hit any of them, keeping things unpredictable. Vunipola and Farrell then clear out quickly, meaning England's shape is setting with what would be, for any other team, 2 pods of 2. Except, as Van Poortvliet hits Genge coming in around the corner, the pods break apart and an entire 2 group goes in to clear out, whilst Genge's previous partner slides into the main shape in field. With 2 phases in the bank now and 7 Kiwis sucked around this ruck, England are now set. Farrell has been managing the main shape, but Smith spots something and rushes round to overrule everyone else. He goes wide. His goose step frees the space for May, and England make it into the 22. The backs clear out, and the free shape has shuffled in. England run 2 in a row, 2 phases of crash-ups, making this a completely different set structure to the one they had set on phases 1 and 2 mere seconds ago. Van Poortvliet and then Simmons pick and go before a bunch of forward carries like this and this and this eventually result on this side in an England penalty. But during that time, 2 clear try-scoring chances open themselves up, but 2 individual players don't make the split-second decisions required to execute a system they're still learning and adapting to. And so those tries don't come. The first is here. After the second forward carry, Simmons is the only forward on his feet, functioning very smartly as a third centre. However, Farrell calls a play and Smith assesses the situation around him. He knows this will only work if Simmons is on his shoulder, tight, here, meaning Farrell fixates one Smith before passing to the other, meaning Ioane bites in on England's Smith, who then has 3 potential passing options open to him, depending which one Clark decides to miss a tackle on. But with Simmons running this line, it will be easy for Ioane to double job Smith to Steward, meaning Clark only needs to watch Tuolangi. However, it's all academical in the end anyway, because Van Poortvliet dummies and goes himself, and whilst he does get over the gain line, you do wonder what could have happened if Simmons ran the right line and Van Poortvliet didn't throw the dummy. Yeah, England do keep going, and a few phases later, another chance opens itself. Sinclair carries here, and Simmons slots in once again as a third centre. The squad sit as this kind of weird blob for a few moments before taking shape at the last second, so the All Blacks don't have time to prepare themselves. They don't know what to expect. Smith picks and times the pass perfectly. And if Tuolangi gives the early ball here, Steward can draw Mwanga, who is emergency covering the wide channels, and put May in at the corner. However, Tuolangi crashes it up instead, and Smith has to instantly re-strategize, calling for another forward to come in and assess his options again. Oh, the penalty's been blown, that's fair enough, we'll play with that. I think Saturday was the best game Marcus Smith has played for England. Whilst it took over an hour to see his flashy Quinn stuff slide out the box, either side of that, we saw a near flawless 80-minute performance of exceptional decision making, brilliant kicking, and an attack shape and structure management that he was only half executing in the Six Nations. This was a properly outstanding performance by Marcus Smith. This passage in particular is some real George Ford shit, and I don't use that phrase lightly. The lineout is a mess and ends up in Smith's hands. A year ago, he probably would have had a crack himself, but he surrenders the few inches that would gain to keep himself on his feet, knowing he's too important to the structure of the team, and falls in behind to call the play. He instructs Sinclair to carry into these 2 defenders, knowing it will split the All Blacks forwards from backs, and it works. Whitelock and Lomax reload across, but this is of no consequence because he knows Ioane's eyes are on him. He barks repeatedly for Simmons to stay on his inside, and it causes Whitelock and Lomax to hang back, waiting for the pass to be dropped off to the flanker. This is when Smith then goes for his trademark goose step, and Ioane fixates on him, knowing what a running threat he is. This changes the entire picture. Pause here, Steward is the obvious ball, but trusting Ioane's watching him, Smith watches Talea instead, and sees him spot this too. He steps in on Steward. So, Smith takes a step back inside to draw Ioane further out position, and instead drops it behind to Tuolangi, who no one is watching because he's not in a realistic position. He's straight through. Bowden runs a great blocking line to prevent Steward getting into proper support until it's too late, but it leaves England on the try line. Smith lets the forwards rumble on until advantage is called, at which point he barks the ball out. He drops an early pass off to Farrell, who in turn spins it to May, who is just not really a natural distributor, and the extra second he requires allows Bowden to just get in his face and force him to take it in. And this passage is promising in another way. Smith picks the perfect pass to send England careering over the gain line, then challenges the line himself in the next phase before allowing Farrell to take over attack management flawlessly. He waits until he sees something and then sets one of their evolving 2 pods on his shoulder, flat, hitting Cowan-Dickey late and incredibly lateral. The trademark Farrell pass sending him into clear black water. England then reload for the next phase with numbers wide, and Farrell and Smith in tandem, only for some brilliant being a prick by Retallick to cause a knock on. All of this is to say, England's attack was incredibly close to clicking the entire game. It was 65 minutes of being one pass, one clear out, one slightly different dummy line away from opening the All Blacks up over and over. And it shouldn't have really been that surprising then when they finally started to do it in the final quarter. With so much going through either the Smith-Farrell axis or Tuolangi crash balls, the All Blacks only watch the options outside Farrell, and Takiyaho does a brilliant job tracking across from the tail of the line-out, and it creates this disconnect. Faz absolutely steams onto the ball, and right as Papali'i shoulders him in the face, he drops it inside to May, who splits the two forwards tracking across, the prop also working across from the back of the line out, but not as fast and hard as Takiyaho, to go right through. He offloads to Curry, and England are now in total control and inside the 22. Smith sees the defence outnumber the attack, so lets Youngs go the other way, Itoje and Vunipola getting them to an edge so they can play off that, and then this is great from Youngs. He steps over to pin Barrett into the ruck, and it draws the penalty. It prevents Barrett being able to roll away. This attack ultimately comes to nothing, but it sets the template for how England inverted what they've been doing for 80 minutes in some areas whilst clicking together in others, because this is lovely. This is just gorgeous work. Smith hangs it perfectly, and Curry taps it back to Mako Vunipola, who straightens up. Ribbons and Curry clear out beyond the ruck. This group of Kiwis are just left fumbling and stumbling to try and get round to the other side like a chicken on a big night out, and England reload. It's a shape we saw against Italy in the Six Nations with three runners coming laterally off Smith. It's an entirely straight line. Retallick has no idea which to watch, and Laulala simply isn't fast enough to get across. Smith waits until the last available second to see what Retallick's going to do, which of the forwards he's going to mark, and then he picks none of them. So he explodes through the gap. He's hauled to ground, Bodie is binned, and Will Stewart scores Test Rugby's first accidental try in 7 years. He attempts to place it back, thinking he hasn't made it, and in the process, grounds it, repeating the feat of Romania's Valatan Popolan in 2015. This is one of my favourite moments of recent rugby history. It's a remarkable moment. Popolan had no idea he'd scored a try. I'm so glad I got a chance to bring this up again. And from a different kickoff, England strike again, in a try that shows us everything they're trying to put together in one go. Vunipola charges, and England instantly set into shape once more. Most teams would set the forwards into an arrowhead formation here to allow for lateral passing and easier clear-outs, but England once again slot them into a flat line. They have 4 lines of attack here, 2 separate waves buttered together by Smith and Farrell. The 4 forwards and Farrell all run different lines. Ribbons nudges Whitelock, knocking him slightly off balance. Curry keeps to his line, and George cuts back inside. But the most interesting line is Vunipola's here. He drops from the first wave backwards into the second, changing role entirely, essentially switching from operating as a prop to operating as a centre. Smith invites him on the carry into Whitelock, recently sent stumbling by Ribbons, to make 10 metres, and Smith then calls it on the blindside himself. Stewart makes a great carry, and the All Blacks compress around the ruck, 6 players within 3 metres of the breakdown, but most importantly, this includes most of the backs, who'd spilled onto that blindside in order to cover Stewart. Now, New Zealand this tour have started to play the most dynamic backfield in world rugby, with all 7 backs frequently dropping back if required, as seen here, where it's Geordie Barrett, who's playing centre, dropping back to fullback, but in this case, it leaves them stressed. Geordie is on the wing, with Ioane and Moanga on the floor, meaning 2-cap winger Talea is the only back in the main line. England's switched the arrowhead, and some nice offloading continues the momentum whilst more players get into shape, crucially before New Zealand's backs have reloaded. Slade takes the ball at 10, which allows England to now siphon off into 5 lines of attack, 3 waves with both Farrell and Smith now set in behind. Farrell times this pass to perfection, and while Smith doesn't have the time to straighten properly, he can work the overlap and get England over halfway. England then set into the inversion of their previous structure. A forward to carry with several playmakers in a lateral line behind them. A genius innovation that means New Zealand know maybe the ball's going wide, but they don't know who's going to throw it. As such, these 2 players both watch Smith, but instead it goes to Slade, and he fires Ribbon through a gaping gap before he just delivers an unbelievable offload. This is absolutely brilliant out the back. Farrell is running a great support line, and whilst arguably he maybe throws the pass too early, the important thing is that he throws it. Stewart barges through and leaves 3 Kiwi backs on the floor in the process. Another arrowhead sets up and Vunipola attacks again, but Havili steps in to watch the ruck, and it leaves New Zealand numbers short on the blind side. Stewart calls this out himself, with Guy Porter outside him. The dummy puts him over for what might be the best team try of the year. 12 of England's 15 players touch the ball in this movement, and literally everybody contributes with a key clear out or vital dummy line. And from the next kickoff, they do exactly the same. Several waves of attack set, but this time Mako Vunipola slides forwards from wave 2 to wave 1 to carry on Marcus Smith's shoulder. Youngs picks and goes and manages to buy another penalty. England's first few phases are great, but then Youngs does this. If there's a winger in position to chase, this is a brilliant kick that likely nets England a 5-metre set piece, but without, well, it's lucky that in a few minutes time TJ Perenara is going to do a very similar thing. Mate takes it in, and just look at this. 10 Kiwis condensed around this ruck, having not spread properly, whilst the entire England team have taken shape. Smith calls it out himself, and whilst Barrett does a great job putting pressure on him, he gets the pass away, and this is brilliant by Curry. It's really great. The awareness to stop his momentum, plant his feet so he can make sure the ball gets wide is excellent, and something that wouldn't occur to too many forwards even at international level. Farrell gives the early ball, which forces Surveyor to keep his eyes on Stewart, who then puts Slade away, offloading exactly as he's caught. Porter focuses on just staying in field, and England are now really close to the try line. Ribbons then runs a great line, clattering into Kiwis like an apple in the world's worst fruit salad. Vunipola then carries again, and whilst the New Zealand defence is numbered up, Mo'unga is forced to step in narrow to make up those numbers, and it allows Stewart, a prop, to barrel between him, a fly off, and Takiaho to cross for his second score of the game. Owen Farrell, in the background, promptly loses his goddamn mind. This kind of attack, so disciplined, structured, changing shape phase to phase, is near impossible to defend if ran with the pace and physicality England bring to it. The Freddie Stewart try, for me, is right up there with Rodrigo Fernandez's glorious solo moment of sheer delight and Abidal's unbelievable means of breaking the semi-final deadlock wide open last month as maybe the best try of 2022. From a pure construct technical attack standpoint, it's unbelievable. And as such, I'd honestly be very surprised if England continued doing it in the Six Nations. This was a perfect trial for Eddie. The patterns him and attack coach Martin Gleeson have been tinkering with work. They netted 19 points in 9 minutes against the bloody All Blacks. He's learned all he has to. He knows this will work. And knowing Eddie Jones is focused on absolutely nothing but the competition that starts in September 2023, I'd be very surprised if they didn't revert back to the dubious patterns of before, the things they were running in this year's Six Nations, for all the games except maybe France and or Ireland in the Six Nations, where England have a real chance to dent the confidence of some of the big dogs as they prepare for the big one. A perfect, functioning attack goes into the back pocket, ready to be pulled out, occasionally in the pools, but in full force once they reach the quarterfinals in Marseille next year. However, there was one more twist in this game yet. Let's not move on too quickly. After the game, Owen Farrell, the captain, said the decision to take the draw was one they decided they'd make based on the situation that they saw before them, and, well, Jack Willis here nicely nudges the chase, allowing Curry to regather cleanly, but the ball is one anything but. 5 England players are tied into this ruck, including Owen Farrell, with Vunipola floating nearby just in case as well. England could try to attack for a phase or two, but they don't have forwards in place. They don't really have anyone to clear out. Going either side here is a turnover risk, and, well, look, as a Welsh fan, earlier in this year, Wales fought back to go level in almost as unlikely circumstances as this, but instead of taking the draw, they decided to kick downfield in the hope of pressuring the Springboks into giving away a penalty. They lost the game. England left with a draw, which, let me tell you, feels like a much better result, even if it is a bit of a shrug. It remains the most baffling, fascinating thing in rugby. Not as common as some sports, yet possible, unlike others, a result that almost always ends up reflecting the game in one way or another, but a decision that only sometimes reflects who the team really are. A heroic performance reduced to a shrug. That's taking the draw in rugby. A decision we'll never know quite how to fully feel about.